So it's 3, 2, 1. All right. So I have my mentor. Can I tell? I didn't say that to you. I'm talking to Frans Stiene. Is it Stiene?
Yes, yeah.
And he is my mentor. He's a Reiki, international Reiki master, and he speaks all over the world, and it's has to do with Reiki, and it has to do with well-being, and it has to do with beauty, and it has to do with kindness. And I am so really honored that we can do this, and I hope I do it right because you're so special, and I want people to know about you, and I want them to know now more than ever. So hi.
Thanks, Betty. Yeah, yeah. I still have, you know, we know each other for a long time now, and it's I always have fond memories of meeting you and seeing you, and yeah, what I was just saying before the show started, that I feel that Betty is actually my mentor, you know, and I've seen her grown in these last, you know, I don't know how long we know each other now, but yeah, in the last 7 years or maybe 10, you've blossomed like crazy. And I always say, wow, when I'm your age, I want to be like Betty. You're my role model. This is
No,
just
I
so
think you'll be
beautiful.
just I think you'll be just fine. But you met me when I was just kind of bedraggled.
Yeah.
What am I going to do here with the rest of my life? And then I really think Reiki made a really big difference in the change in me, Frans. I
Well,
really,
I mean, you see it in a lot of people, and particularly I think also Betty, because you really took it on board and you really listened to the teachings, and you're also really engaged with the practices, you know. And for me, this is, if we want to facilitate change, just listening is not good enough. We have to move with the practice. We have to grab hold of it and really apply them in our daily life. And I've seen it with myself. I'm 53 now, and I was
are
31.
you?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my, you're a
And
better 53 than I am. 110. Wow, 53. I'm shocked.
I still feel good. But when I was 30, I felt also very down. I had a drinking problem and a lot of emotional stuff. But then I took it also when I found certain teachings. I took them at heart and really sat down on my butt and practice. And it's been a wonderful journey ever since. Yeah.
So how there's so much for people to learn. We're talking about Reiki. Can you explain what Reiki is to I remember I was once talking to a man, someone fixed me up, and he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I do television commercials and I do Reiki. And he said, what? And I said, Reiki. And he said, whatever, honey. I thought, oh my God. So much for him. But do you mind telling our listeners about Reiki a little bit?
Yeah, it's in a way we can make it complicated and very simple, but in a very down-to-earth way. It's
Yeah.
a Japanese spiritual practice, what includes precepts. So, for example, a precept: do not worry, do not anger, and really trying to take that on board for yourself. Then there is very specific meditation practices in it. Then there is hands-on healing. Then there's different kind of levels you can grow into.
Right.
And there is symbols and mantras. So these mantras you chant, for example, and you internalize these symbols for mindfulness. And then there's something what is called an initiation or empowerment, sometimes called reiju. In Japanese, it's a blessing, a spiritual blessing.
Yeah.
And when we apply that for ourselves, we hopefully start to feel less angry, less worried, less fearful, more kind to ourselves than other people. And then a side effect of that, of course, is that, and what has become actually quite famous of the system of Reiki, is the hands-on healing part. But I always say, you know, when we grow deeper into laying bare our own inner great bright light, what the ultimate aim is of the system of Reiki, and we can call that our true nature, our essence, or spirit, whatever that is, and whatever you like to call it for yourself. When we lay that more and more, then of course our hands-on healing on other people is going to be very different.
So I do, when you say when you met me, I was different. I really, I really took it into my heart, Reiki.
Mm.
And I don't know where I heard Reiki calls upon your ability to heal yourself, but I somehow just realized that if I was going to be a Reiki master and someone was going to come for a Reiki treatment, I couldn't be, I mean, it's an exaggeration, drinking, smoking, and yelling at somebody on the phone before they show up. I have to have
Yes.
like a little bit. And and then I thought, why not? This just feels so much better. But where would people get what we're just talking about now? You have a website. I know you're on YouTube.
Yeah, I teach internationally. Well, now, of course, there's some
Right,
restrictions with this.
right.
So I try to do some videos and now some online stuff. But yeah, check out my website at www.ihreiki.com. And you find all the practices. We have a lot of online stuff at the moment. We actually have done that for a long time already because
Have.
I feel that the after support, I think, is really important. You know, people come to a training and then the after support for me is very essential. When I first trained in the system of Reiki, I lived in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and the first Reiki teacher I trained with there, and after Reiki 1, 2, and 3, I had some questions. So I emailed him and nothing back. I emailed him again, and then again, I didn't hear anything. And then finally I wrote his girlfriend. I said, you know, is he all right? Is anything wrong? And he said, no, he doesn't want to answer your question. So don't send him anything. And I thought, wow, if I ever going to teach, I don't want to be like that. And
Yeah.
so actually for many, many years, we have our own video system built into our website so that we can actually communicate with students. So we don't have to use Zoom. And it's a really great tool for supporting people after it. So, you know, it's not just you do a course and then bye, but
Yeah.
actually that after support and after care. And for me, I see it the same as I see you, you know, when I see you again in New York. And even if we don't physically meet, I see we kind of holding hands together and walk this path together of trying to be kinder and more compassionate and more open and, as you say, less angry and worried. Yeah.
So for the for all of us, every single person, it's an issue. I'm in Red Hook, New York with my granddaughters, and the drama and the, I mean, watching them fight with each other or
Mm.
whatever, and watching everyone kind of tire, and it's a real lesson in why we get mad. But anger and meanness does not come from a good place. It doesn't come from a happy place. So
Yeah, I mean, like it was quite interesting, you know. I'm drinking here this little cup of coffee, and if someone would bump me, then of course coffee would spill out of the cup, not
right,
tea or not champagne, but that may be nice, but
right.
but coffee will spill out of the cup. So if I have anger in me and someone bumps me, you know, right, with words or physically, etc., then anger spills out. But if I have love inside of myself, then love spills out. So, you know, this is for me a very simple metaphor that whatever I have in myself, in my own system, and particularly during these times we live in now, you know, we get bumped left, right, and center through the community, to our countries, to everything. You know, for example, I live in Holland, and Holland is a little bit more flexible. I mean, it is still a lockdown period, but it's a little bit more flexible, and they just started to open up. And I just had a massage for the first time
Oh,
again. I like having massages,
yeah.
and so someone from New York heard that I had a massage and said, "Oh, Frans, how did they do it? Did they wear gloves, a plastic apron, a mask?" I said, "No, it was just like nothing changed. We hugged, we came in, hi Frans, and get a hug, go and lay down. It was just like normal." And you know, so there's of course a lot of fear, worry, anxiety. And of course we have to be clear about certain things, you know, protect people and protect ourselves. But sometimes that fear can also be too much, you know, and when we have too much fear, then I think as a person, we become really paralyzed with fear and worry and anxiety. And that in itself is also not a good way of being. And for example, not many people talk about this, but 1 million people die every year of suicide, Betty. Isn't it? It's 1 million a year. I looked it up the other day.
People.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And you know, like we have, I don't know how many people worldwide died of COVID-19, but then I think, wow, for years already, 1 million people die of suicide, and hardly any help is given. And yet this is happening. So there's a lot of things now what we can actually wake up to.
How did you stop drinking, and how did you go on the right path?
No, it's
I want people, anyone listening, to have
yeah.
like a view into how that looks, maybe for them.
Betty, I was a big drinker. From when I was 16 till about 30. My problem was that if I took one beer,
right,
I could not stop. I had to drink whatever was in the house. And then I lived for 7 years downtown Haarlem in Holland. And so all the cafes and restaurants, I would come out of work, and there was my neighbor with a restaurant owner and some seats outside. And he would go, "Hey, Frans, a beer?" Yeah. Well, then I had one, and the next come, and problems started. So when I was 30, we decided to move from Holland and actually go to Asia. And our first country was India, because we liked the Indian food. And also we heard that it was the hardest part to travel. So we thought, well, if we do the hardest, then all the other countries are easy. But anyway, we spent in the end 2 years in India and about 3-4 months in Nepal. And when we arrived in India, we went up north to Ladakh. Beautiful. They call it Little Tibet. Have you been there?
It's so funny. I was, no, I haven't, but I met a man from Ladakh, and he had photographs, and he sold them on the street in New York.
Oh, okay.
And I treasured that photograph.
Oh, it's such a beautiful country. Like these mountain tops are just gorgeous. And then you look down and you see these turquoise rivers, and then these monasteries stacked onto the wall. And it's just, and the people are just gorgeous and so sweet. But anyway, so I arrived there, and I also, from when I was 16 till I was about 32, I had a back problem. It's called Sherman disease. And so they put me into plaster, and I had a lot of physiotherapy and lots of strong painkillers to numb the pain in my back. They couldn't do anything about it. And so drinking in those pills was kind of not so good, of course. And so I'm in Ladakh, and I'm having difficulty carrying my backpack, and I feel down and depressed, and I'm like, what the hell? And so I meet this guy, and he says, well, there is someone doing a healing later in the week. Do you guys want to come? I said, well, okay, that'll be interesting. And at the same time, in this little group of people I'd met, as a lady, I think she did, I'm not sure. You see, there was either a massage therapist or whatever, and I was drinking a beer and complaining about my back. And she said, well, why are you drinking beer then? This is not good for your health. And she was like this. I said, okay, then I stopped. And something happened. I stopped that day, and I never drank again. I don't know why. It was like, if I look back, I didn't notice it then, but if I look back, I think I made a decision. I need to do something for myself, to heal myself, because if not, I'm going down the drain. Unfortunately, my family, one of my uncles, he was like, he had a small little apartment, but he was a street bum. And I would pick him up. I was like 12, 13, 14. I would pick him up from the street when I was out with friends and bring him home. And, you know, he was this big, massive guy with a big beard, always drunk, lying on the street. And so, you know, these heritage in a way in the family. And so I thought, man, if I don't stop, I become like Uncle Cor. And he's a favorite uncle of mine. He passed away when I was 16. But yes, and it was really interesting that at that point when I made that decision, enough is enough. Now I need to do something because else Frans might not survive this journey. And so, yes, I stopped cold turkey. I still smoked a little bit at that time, and then I stopped that too. And then I went to this local healer, and she did something where I suddenly felt so expanded and open. Now I kind of understand what she did, but at that time I didn't. And at that moment, there was, I kind of couldn't find Frans. That Frans disappeared. Uh, the room disappeared. If you'd asked me if it was 2 minutes or 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks, I would have believed all of you.
Right.
And I felt this tremendous amount of heat and energy going, not just through one part where she touched me, but through my whole being. And later I asked, how long did that take? And it was like, not even like 2 minutes, maybe not even 1 minute. And it was just like instant, like, I'm having a lamp in front of me. If I would press a button, instantly there is this bright light. And it was like that. Instantly there was this, expandedness, this openness. And then that for me triggered the next day that I wanted to buy books on spirituality, what I never bought. And I think, what's happening with me?
Wow.
Yeah.
So when was that?
That was 23 years ago. Yeah, 23 years ago. It was
And
when I
that
was
was in
30.
Ladakh. That was in Ladakh.
And that was in Ladakh. Yeah.
Wow. So then you went to Nepal, which is somehow I was in Nepal, and we were like texting each other, and my friend who was from Copenhagen wanted he wanted to learn Reiki.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And you recommended someone in Copenhagen to teach him Reiki, which he did and does, which is Hans. He's a wonderful man. But so then what? And then you went to Nepal, and your wife at that point, was the two of you became spiritually curious?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think she was already much more earlier spiritual curious, but I wasn't. And so then we traveled again through India, and we went to all these different places. And at the meantime, I was reading books on yoga, whatever. And one day I bought a book about Reiki. I had no idea. It was by an Indian guy. And so it was mainly focused on hands-on healing. So I remember sitting in bed doing some hands-on healing. And I thought, well, this is easy. I like that.
Yeah.
And then I was in Nepal and Kathmandu, and there's the, what's that, German bakery, and I think Pilgrims or something, bookstore, bakery. Anyway, so they had a sign or a Reiki teacher. Like, oh, okay, let's do it. He was a pot smoking hippie teaching the system of Reiki. There was beautiful. But the funny thing was, Betty, we did Reiki 1, 2, and 3 over a long period there, because we got married there in Nepal as well. So
Padmas and Baba, I mean, weren't you
man,
his tomb? I was, and you were, and
I mean, all this interesting stuff actually started to happen also to me. I started to have really strange dreams. I started to have really interesting if you can call it spiritual experiences. And then so we've done Reiki 1, 2, and 3. Reiki 3 was really bad with this guy. He said, no, actually, you booked it, but I've got to go on a trip, so just read this and that's it. You're done. And so, but the next day I'm standing outside for Pilgrim's bookstore, and these two people are coming along, and I mean, it is full of Westerners right there, you know that, full of backpackers. And this couple comes and says to us, excuse me, do you know any Reiki teachers here?
Oh, no.
And we go, well, we just did a Reiki teacher class, but we have no idea. But maybe you find in here a little, notification. And so they went inside and we said, well, this is a sign. This is just crazy. So we went after them and they became our first students. And then then kind of after that, we moved to Darjeeling. And when we arrived in Darjeeling, we kind of felt home. It was a really strange experience, like almost like if you would believe in that, almost like we lived there before.
Like you lived there before.
Yeah. And so very quickly we got in contact with some local people, and we opened up a Reiki center there, and we did volunteer treatments, volunteer classes. We would go to the tea plantations, where there's little villages where the Darjeeling tea comes from, and we would do their hands-on healing sessions and teach classes. And it was just and we did that for a year there. It was just such a wonderful volunteer journey. And those people also there was just so open, like here, I think when we talk about healing, and now say my neighbor is sick, and I would say, oh, shall I do a treatment? Well, before maybe she or he allows me to do a treatment is 2 hours later, because we have to talk about it, we have to explain it, blah, blah. There are no questions asked. They just say, yes, do whatever you need to do. And they were just so open and so ready. It was just wonderful.
Wow. Darjeeling. I know that in Nepal, those beautiful plateaus, those terrace tea gardens, or where they grow tea. And I just wondered, Darjeeling must be absolutely beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Yeah. I would love to go back there one day. Yeah.
Yeah. So after Darjeeling, you went back to Holland, or?
No, actually we went to Australia. So Brahman, my ex-partner, is from Australia, and so we went to Australia, and then I've lived there for 20 years, and about 2.5 years ago I moved back to Holland. So yeah, it's an interesting journey. I never thought I would live in Australia, and then when I lived in Australia, I never thought I would live back in Holland again. But these things happen, and I think this is wonderful. And and I see this a little bit with you too, Betty. And it's my son came to visit me. He still lives in Australia, and he came to visit me with a friend in end of December, January, just the last December. And his friend, after a week being with me, he said, Frans, if you ever want to write a book about yourself, you need to do a title like this. And he said, I can't remember the exact title. And he said something, how to flow through life without any effort. He said, I look at you, you're just floating through life without any effort.
It seems that way.
It seems that way, of course. And, for me, of course, there comes a time when we can allow it to let happen more. But when we want to be effortless, we first have to put a lot of effort in it, isn't it? So we first put a lot of effort in it through meditation, all of these practices, so yoga, tai chi, so that we don't hold on a lot to that anger and worry and fear, and then we can lead a more effortless life. Yeah.
So I know you do chanting, and everyone, I just want to say again, if you look up Frans, it's Frans, and his last name is Stiene. And if you go to YouTube, I do a morning Japanese calligraphy class, and there's a guy that's he teaches martial arts, and he has things wrapped around his head, and he's very Japanese. And I sent him your chanting, and he was so impressed. So I'm just saying, folks, it's gorgeous. But what kind of is your meditation chanting?
Well, I went to Japan for the first time in 2001. And then, of course, when you go to Japan, there's a lot of chanting in Japan. And at that time, it was all very new to me. And as you know, you've been to Nepal, and where I lived in Darjeeling, there's these monasteries, and you go in, and all these monks and nuns are chanting, and it's just so beautiful. I remember sitting in a lot of those, like 6 a.m. I loved to go there when I was living in Darjeeling, and these monks are chanting. It's just so powerful. But I never thought I could do this, of course. And then I went to Japan, lots of chanting. And then one of my teachers taught me a little bit of chanting, and I go like, I'm not sure. And then I worked with a Taoist teacher for about 12 years. Unfortunately, she passed away, and she had a really big influence on my life. She was Chinese, lived in Australia. She came from a very old Taoist tradition, was trained in it like from the year 3, you know, and she was very small. And she taught me to work, her forte was really working with what they call like primordial qigong, where you allow that energy to arise without any specific forms, and these forms can also be sound. So at one point I could feel these sounds emerging from this open space within me, and so she helped me to facilitate that and coax it almost out of me in a way, and that triggered a more interest in it.
Was it hard to let out those sounds?
Yes, it's really difficult because I could almost hear it within my mind energy, and then to actually vocalize it. And some of these sounds were, I don't even know how to vocalize them.
Right.
And so it was really interesting. And so I started to really work with that. And then there were even exercises I would do to, I haven't done that for a while, and thanks for bringing this up, Betty. And I would actually go and stand in front of a person and feel that deep interconnectedness, and then I would make their sound through my body.
Oh, wow.
But if I would do this in a group, sometimes I did it, and then I would go to the next person. The next person's sound would come up, and sometimes it was so different that you really had to make sure that when you move from one person to the next person, that you empty your mind, and also not to get hooked on, oh, she said that, so this sound it needs to be. So I wouldn't use the word draining. It wasn't really draining, but it took a lot of afterwards I felt so full actually of energy. So that's why I wouldn't call it draining, but it was so powerful that afterwards I actually had to sit down to put the pieces of Frans again together, so to speak.
You were taking pieces of them. Where does somebody like me, but where would we find somebody? I mean, I listen to what you say, and we've talked, and you know, having a meditation teacher is essential. Where does one find a meditation teacher? Like a woman like that, oh my God, what a gift.
This is always a tricky one too, because so after my Taoist teacher died, then I really was looking for a Japanese teacher, and I wanted to train with a Japanese priest, and it's very difficult. I didn't want a priest where you can go and say, hey, here's some money and train me. You know, I didn't want to commercialize. So finally, through the right channels, I found someone, and he's been my teacher since 2012. His chanting is unbelievable. I mean, I was again in Japan last year, and it's when he chants, it's like a sword cutting through everything. So for me, of course, there's many meditation teachers, and sometimes they're good, sometimes not so good. I think if we have to be honest, but of course we have to find someone what suits us. And there's so many different kind of forms of meditation. So there's visualizations, there's chanting, there's also movement meditations, there's zazen or zen sitting. And so you have to experience a little bit of these different forms of meditation and see how that suits you. And then within that form, try to find a teacher where you really gel with. You know, the more you gel with that person, then of course it's easier to follow their journey. So for me, it's when I do my own training, I try as much as possible to do one-on-one training for myself. And this is why I also, yes, I do groups, but I also have people coming to Holland where we just do 2, 3, 4, 5 days one-on-one, because then you can really fine tune and tailor make it to that particular person. So, try to find someone who is willing, and to also, I think, to do those one-on-one trainings with you if you really want to go deeper into that aspect.
So I'm just going to give them your information again. It's Frans, Frans at IH, like International House of Reiki. So it's IHREIKI.com. That's, I mean, we're one-on-one now, but we don't do meditation with Zoom. Is that right? I mean, now in these times, it would be wonderful, because I do listen to your chanting when you sent out, which is pretty recent. And I'm so astonished at your Japanese, your command of that language. And also, you said that you maybe lived in Darjeeling at some point in the past. You must have lived in Japan.
Well, I mean, this is, I don't talk much about it, but yeah, again, the first time when I arrived in Japan, again, also felt really home, felt very comfortable. When I do these kind of practices, and also the chanting for me has become something, how do I say it? Something almost alive within me. It's become a living thing. I do it on a very regular daily basis. And I don't speak Japanese, but I can do these mantras and this chanting and et cetera, et cetera. And I was last year in Japan with a group, and for the first time, my teacher was willing to do half a day with the group. And what was really interesting, Betty, so he's sitting there and he goes to one person.
Very tall guy.
Well, he looks tall on the photo, the one photo. He looks really...
I think, my God, he's tall.
He's actually not so tall, but on the photo, he sits on a little stool, and I sit on on the floor. So that's, and he's got his robes on. That makes him taller. But so we're sitting there, and he looks to the, I think there's about 20 people, and he looks to the first person on the right, and he moves his hand out towards them and says a sound, and the person goes, what? No, and he does it again, and I say, okay, he wants you to repeat the sound. And so he went with that sound to everybody, and each person repeated it 2, 3, 4 times until he was kind of satisfied. And then at the end, he said something really interesting. He said, well, I can see and feel and hear if a person is healthy the way they say the sound. And then later on, he did it again. And then I thought, okay, let me observe it from a different angle. And then I thought, oh, now I see what he's trying to do. And of course, we can feel this within ourselves. The more, for example, if we observe ourselves really clearly, if, for example, I speak really fast and I go like this, then it means I'm a little bit unbalanced in a way, right? Yes. Because then I'm toppling over words, I'm looking for sentences, or I don't finish them. Or, for example, if I'm really quiet, and quiet is okay, but then we also need to speak. We have to communicate. So we have to find that middle way within our speech. And a while ago, someone said to me, Frans, would it be beneficial for me? I'm a trainer and I want to train more, to actually do a public speaking course. I said, well, that is great. Of course, it's great. I said, but most important is find that balance within yourself. When we find that balance within ourselves, then of course our speech will change too, isn't it? Yes. And the way we word our things will change. So, for example, if I have less anger in me, then my speech will be less angry. And then the way I speak will also not be infused with like a prickly quality. And so, this is, if I feel nervous, then of course there is a nervous quality to my words. If I feel calm and centered, there is and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it all really comes back to finding that inner balance within yourself again. But it's the same, Betty. I mean, you're acting, and you're doing this modeling and acting. It's the same in that, isn't it?
Well, it is, because people don't know why. I'm not being, it's true. People don't know why they like you. But if I audition for something and somebody likes me, they're seeing the best part of me. That makes them feel good, and they figure maybe it'll make the product look better. But I watched you at at the Omega Institute. I watched you.
Yes,
And
yeah.
it was a Reiki weekend, and these people were very, very well qualified, but without a doubt, everybody was doing their thing, but you were so bright and
Mm.
so you communicated individually just by your warmth and your ability to really like those people with everyone. They were sitting on the edge of their chair. They were loving it. And here, these other people, they're Reiki people and they're wonderful, but all the work you've done on yourself, and it's not like work on yourself, but all the opening, let me say
Yeah.
that you've done to your heart and your soul and your place on this earth, it matters. It matters. I mean, with you, I'm so happy that you're doing this with me, because whatever we can share with people, I think it's going to be amazing. I'm listening to speech after speech. People are just doing whatever about the pandemic, but you
Mm.
have the fire and the chanting. I felt like I was down deep in prehistoric times.
Yeah, I just created this 20-minute video with a Japanese chant and with fire in it. And this particular chant is about that inner fire burning away, all the anger and worry and fear. And then, of course, again, Betty, for me, this is, my biggest role models would be the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat
Yeah,
Hanh, and they walk into this room and the whole room is transformed. And I
yeah,
thought, wow, man, these people are bright 24 hours a day. They're the 7-Eleven open 24 hours a day. And it's just amazing. And I thought, wow, when I was in Japan in 2003, I met someone who in Japan is seen as like a living Buddha. And I was standing next to him. It was all very strange. It's a longer story, but I keep it short. It was very strange. And so I'm standing next to him, and he's just talking like we're talking for 5 minutes. And I felt I was just receiving this healing after healing after healing. And an hour later, I was in the train and I was still shaking with this
wow,
energy and this openness and this compassion and kindness. And then I thought, man, this guy, he looked so normal. He just looked like you and me. There was nothing special between brackets about this guy. And then I thought, well, if he can do it, then Betty and Frans can do it. And for me, this is so, yeah, it's really engaging with the people. But this is for me also, when I think about teaching and spirituality, is not just an intellectual thing. And someone wrote to me the other day and said, Frans, I watched a video of some other teacher and said, do you know that person? I said, yes, I do know that person. Said, oh, this is the first time I saw that person. Said, but she said, it was just almost like only intellectual. That person didn't have that juice from his heart, from his essence. And I said, well, thank you for saying that, because when I hear and speak to that person, I have the same thing. And this is where there is that big different quality when you meet those real teachers, for example, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, or these teachers in Japan or China or wherever you find them, and you feel it. I mean, you've been to Nepal and you meet these Buddhist
oh,
teachers. It's a very different juice what comes out of them, is this luminosity. And so when I lived for 2 years in India and Nepal, I met those teachers and I said, you're my role models. This is what I want. I just don't want just an intellectual journey. This is easy, but to actually have that direct experience and try to convey this direct experience with your audience, with life, with the cash register, with the person in the supermarket, in the shop, with the massage therapist.
right.
And yeah, absolutely.
So I met Mathau Richard
Oh, yes, lovely.
in Nepal, and I met him because one stormy New York night, I read that he was, and I had no idea who he was, but someone from Nepal was going to be interviewed by Richard Gere. And I was not at all interested in the fact that Richard Gere, in fact, that was like Richard Gere, even though he's a very devoted Buddhist. But this man made me interested. So I went to hear him, and he was just that person that you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And when it was over, I bought all his books and I read all his books, and he was from Session Monastery in Kathmandu. And I looked it up, and I made a reservation. It was $13 a night with food. And I made a reservation, and I stayed a month.
Fantastic.
And I went on a retreat, and he was at the retreat when I was there, and I told them, they said, "Oh, he's here. Do you want to meet him?" And that, it was the same feeling that you're talking about. There is, and he's actually been called the happiest man in the world. I think it's Yale, I'm not sure, but they did put electrodes on his head, and what changes when he meditates.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
That's him. And so I got to talk to him, and that was my experience. That was what that was. And he comes from a very worldly life. His father was, his parents were artists and teachers and so forth. And I had that experience with him, and it made everything else. That's why I want everyone to know that all we have sometimes are these things that are thrown in our face in terms of meditating or spirituality. It's just, you know, the stuff that's sold to you, kind of. And
yes, absolutely.
But what you're really looking for is the simplicity.
Yes, I mean, this is, again, I love Matthew's books, you know, and this is what I really like when I read books like, for example, by him, or by one of my favorite also is Senrei Suzuki, a Zen master, or some other Zen masters, or you know, Tibetan Buddhist teachers. There is Chokyung Nima, another great Tibetan teacher. And when I read those books, it's just so clear, you know, there's no bullshit. It's just clear to the point without any of the fluffiness. Is just straight to the point. And, you know, I think if I'm going to practice this anyway, why not go straight to the point? Why not, you know, why would I deviate to left, right? I want to be there. If I want to go to France, yeah, it's nice if I stop in from Amsterdam and I stop in Brussels. But if I hang around there and never arrive in France, I better go straight to the point. And this is what I like about with those teachers. They're so clear. And for me, this also comes through one simple thing, because they all sat on their butt and did their practice and integrated their practice. It's not just words, it's a really embodiment of the practice. And when we have that embodiment of the practice, then you really feel touched deep inside when you meet a person like that.
Thich Nhat Hanh, he's just my other guy.
Yeah.
I mean, his little voice, his beautiful, sweet voice doing these meditations. So I just want to say that Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's ThichNhat and HANH, I think.
Yeah.
And if you really want to go right to the sweetest spot of spirituality, it's just so simple, and it has so much to do with breathing in and breathing out.
Well, this is it, Betty. I think, you know, you're saying it already. It's so simple. And yeah, I think this is also the trickiest bit, because it's so simple, it becomes difficult. And, you know, we like to complicate things, but actually it's so simple. And this is the beauty when you work with teachers like that. It's so simple. It's straight to the point. It's simple. It's clear. And yeah, I mean, I love his work as well. It's fantastic.
And he has beautiful artwork with the calligraphy pen brush.
Absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it is. And anyway, that's Thich Nhat Hanh. And you've read Matthew.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, the first time I came, well, this is an interesting story, because when I lived in Darjeeling, I first, of course, stayed in a little guest house, and there was an Italian staying in the guest house who had also done Reiki. He had done Reiki 1 and 2, And there was a tulku, a Tibetan reincarnated man staying there. Well, he was 21. He was a young man. And that was me and Bronwyn. And I think there was maybe one other person. It was a very small little guest house. And so we decided to stay in Darjeeling to open up a Reiki center and do volunteer work. And from the guest house, we would walk to the main little town square, maybe 5-10 minute walk, and we would walk past this house. It was like prime A position. And you could see that the bottom part was occupied and the second part was empty. And so I said to, the guy was called Sergio. I said, Sergio, who's this building? He'd lived there in Darjeeling for a long time. He was a Tibetan Buddhist, an Italian. I said, Sergio, who lived there? I said, well, Frans, forget about it. He said, that place is from Sonam. Sonam is a wealthy Tibetan man. And he said, I've been asking to rent that top part for a long time now. You won't get it. But every time I walk by it, I thought that's the place.
Right.
So anyway, we knock on Sonam's door, and Sonam opens the door, and his sister is there as well. They're really devout Tibetan Buddhists, beautiful statues in there.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, and so the next day we get a phone call from Sonam and said, oh, can you come to my house? And he said, you guys are getting it. And the whole town was surprised because it'd been empty for years. And I said, how did you guys do it? He says, well, I don't know. We just told them we want to do Reiki. And I had no idea what Reiki was, but just that we want to do some help the community, and they gave it to us. Well, what turned out that particular house, because Sonam came from a very wealthy Tibetan family, when the Tibetans escaped Tibet, and a lot of them went to Darjeeling, all these really high masters stayed at this house. Like Kalu Rinpoche, so all of these really well-known Tibetan teachers stayed in this house. And when you would go to the attic, it was full of old Tibetan artifacts. And I started to have these really interesting experiences also when I was living in this house. So one of the first books I bought was Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche.
Yeah.
He had a monastery in Darjeeling, and he also had stayed in this house. And these photos was taken by Macho. And so that was the first time I read about him, and I saw his photography. It was just stunning, absolutely.
It is stunning.
Yeah.
And he does so much. And I can't believe how fast this time has gone. Yes, I just want to say this is that when he did say, yes, I will sit and talk to her. And we did sit together, and it was like, someone took a picture of it. One of the guys that works there, just for me. And my son-in-law said, that is a magical moment in your life. You look like I look like I was levitating. But
yeah.
He does an awful lot of work for other people.
It is. I mean, I think this is really where that compassion comes in.
Yes.
And it's not always monetary, like where we have to earn money, but, he does that, I think, also in a really beautiful way. And for me, this again comes because he'd sit on his butt and does a practice and embodies the practice. And therefore also, for me, it's really simple. The more I get in touch with my own true nature, then of course, whatever I do and touch is going to be affected by that. So no matter if it's photography or painting or sculpturing or gardening or just making a meal, that has then a very different quality because it's been touched by something quite different. And we all know that if I make a painting, I'm angry, or make a meal when I'm angry. There's a beautiful movie, La Como Aqua para Chocolate or something. And it's a Spanish movie, or I think they speak Spanish.
Is it like Water for Chocolate?
Yeah, like Water for Chocolate. Yeah. Fantastic movie. But it is where this cook, he's full of emotions, and whatever emotions he has, then it goes into the food. But this is the truth, and this is why people like that, or like Thich Nhat Hanh, their calligraphy work is just so amazing, because it comes from that infusement of their true nature.
And it is the way they see the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
different look on the world.
completely. I mean, his photographs, Matthew, his
Yeah.
photographs are so powerful and loving, and just the actually the landscape of Tibet and Nepal is so absolutely beautiful. That, I mean, he is the reason that I went there, and then I got to meet him, and then I actually, that was that day, and then I don't know, about 2 weeks later I was walking in Kathmandu and he said, "Don't you say hello?" And I went, "Oh my God, he is just something so special." Well, so are you. This has been wonderful. Is there anything, did I miss anything?
I think it was wonderful. Thanks, Betty. Yeah, it's
It was.
yeah.
I just want to go back as to, oh, by the way, I'm going to officially say this here. Could I please go to Japan with you on your
Uh,
next trip?
yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, actually, since last year, we've been starting doing some tours to Japan, and it's been wonderful. Last year was fantastic. We had a fantastic group. We also had a lot of luck. I don't know if we call it luck, but we were very lucky to meet the
Well,
right
I
people
would
at the
love
right
to go.
time.
So
And
I am here saying I would love to go.
yeah,
So this
yeah,
is
I keep you in the
Frans.
loop.
Please, please. As we're speaking, my grandchildren, even Sid, and the dog just got in the other side of the car. So so I just want everyone to know this is Frans Stiene, Frans, and his last name is Stiene. And you can get him at Frans, Frans, at start again, Frans at IHReiki, REIKI.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Betty, and have a wonderful day, and give my love to the family. And
I
we'll talk
will.
soon.
And I send you love. Thank you so much.
Okay,
You.
bye-bye.